Welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In this segment, Pat and James explore how to establish a financial and productivity growth plan for creative adjacent work. The Underachievers also explore if it's possible to have a financial growth plan for purely creative work, and if so, what could it look like? Hey Pat,
Yes, James?
so I'm out of the clubhouse, walking down the street.
What?
Yep, just out of the clubhouse, walking down the street, and all of a sudden, it hit me. How the hell can I have a growth plan for my creative work?
Oh, you're asking me? Because,
I'm asking.
yeah. Okay, well, I think we need to, you know what? I'm just going to cut to the chase. I don't know, but I'd like to discuss it because I think you can.
Okay.
By growth plan, we're talking about how to make more money, basically, how to sell more, how to connect, whatever. And you said, just before we started taping, that for creative adjacent work, you can have a growth plan, like, for your next, 3 years or
Yep.
whatever. You're going to work on this type of project. You're going to do this. You're going to have this funnel, blah, blah, increase income. But you can't do it for creative work because you're just trying to break through.
Yeah.
And
Well, breakthrough, it's subjective, and one thing is a hit, another thing isn't. The world is filled with one-hit wonders.
yeah,
Right?
okay. So you're saying that, you can't really have a growth plan for creative work, or you're asking me, how do you have a growth plan?
Yeah, it
Okay.
feels, I'm leaning into toward I don't think it's entirely possible,
hmm
but
hmm
um, you know, but I'm curious. I am
Well,
curious.
I mean, there's the difference between having a plan and executing the plan successfully. So it's entirely
Mhm.
possible to have a shitty growth plan and do nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I can plan to go to the moon. However, I am not Katy Perry, and I was going to say something. Is it libelous if it's oral? No, slanderous.
Slanders. You're gonna slander Katy Perry?
I went right to the edge of
Wow.
implying. Well, anyway, it doesn't really matter. What we're talking about is, can
That'll
you
be
have
in
a,
the show notes. Pat's slander of Katy
I
Perry.
didn't do it. See, now you're making shit up, which is a good actual, good
Well,
growth plan. Make more shit
we're
up.
trying to get people into those show notes though too. So
Okay, let's try and stick to the topic here. Okay, so so I think you can have a growth plan for your creative work in that you can say to yourself, well, I was saying earlier, it might just be called ambition, right? But it's
right.
actually, it's not discounting, it's kind of more like seeing it as a long game, seeing consistency and productivity really as your markers, because you don't know, as you said, what's going to hit and what's not going to hit.
Hmm.
So the more you create, the more likely it is that something you create will
Yeah.
hit. Also, my growth plan is I'm suggesting to myself that although writing is my field, I love writing.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say I'm successful in it. I did get a book published 2 years ago. Was it 2 years now? 2 years in June. Uh,
Mhm.
did it sell did it sell out the first printing? I have no idea. I have no fucking idea because it was a contest win and I don't want to hassle the publisher to get data off them. So that's a
Yeah.
personal failing on my part. But you know what? I also don't really see that many opportunities now for continuing to market that book or do more stuff because it
Yeah.
was a contest winner. It's very niche and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm bullshitting myself. The idea
It
now for,
well,
hmm?
it becomes part of your back catalog, and
Yeah,
when you
as
do
thin as
have that
that is.
breakthrough, then everybody goes and says, "Oh, we've got to, where's the Adobe file?"
Yeah.
Right?
Could be thick. So, okay, so the growth plan, let's say your early career, mid-level,
Right.
right? You've got the
Hmm.
skills, maybe you trained, maybe you didn't, whatever. Maybe you had a mentor, maybe you didn't, but you've got a bunch
Hmm.
of skills, maybe you've got mad talent, you've got access to materials. Uh, your growth plan might just be to produce a fuckload, work in
Hmm.
different either niche or work in different genres. I'm not so much talking about writing here, but even visual artists have, they have periods that they go through, I guess. And
Mhm.
so, or even materials. So you might also sculpt, paint, blah, blah.
Right, right.
Movies, you might make, your growth plan might be find some local musician and do a, what do you call those things? Music video. Growth plan number one, get your vocabulary in order. Yeah, do a music video and then, do a short, maybe teach at, or offer your services to teach or take courses at the local film school, blah, blah, blah. So you can have a growth plan in your creative industry. In my view, you can't say I'm going to sell 1 million copies of my ninth book because you don't know. You have to take it more incrementally. But I would say that's true of every small creative business too. You don't know where, like AI, I mean, it was a disruptive technology. We don't know where some of our shit's going to go. Um, Luckily, we've got some time to figure it out because it's still such a painfully wasteful and sort of underwhelming technology, but it'll change. It'll get better.
Mhm.
I'm not for it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against it. I'm just saying, talking about it. So I
Mhm.
think you can have a growth plan for your creative work, and I think you can definitely have a growth plan for your creative adjacent work. And I would
Mhm.
say perhaps that's because I come from the lens of I'm running a small business. And if I put that
Mhm.
lens on my creative work, I'd be a
Mhm.
hell of a lot more on top of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's definitely can you put full-time focus onto it is a big piece of that. And I think, yeah, when I think about people we've talked to, and the one person that comes to mind who's got kind of this long tail that you're talking about, where you diversify and just produce and produce and produce, is Isaac Hirotsu Woofter.
Yeah,
Or what? Yeah. And he is in film industry, but he is in every aspect of the film industry. He
yeah,
is acting, screenwriting, he's in production, he's a producer. He is doing everything that you can do,
yeah,
right? You never know with him, right? It may not be the acting, it may not be the screenwriting, but maybe he, for whatever reason, gets into a lane that works for casting, and
yeah,
he becomes the New York casting agent to talk to.
yeah,
You don't
yeah.
know.
And he also
And
does
so,
stage work and stuff. So, he's
yeah.
even diversified within the acting
Yeah.
realm.
And so he's somebody who I would say, I'd put him in the mid-level. I mean, he's doing well. I don't mean, I don't want to, I'm not saying he's not doing well, but he's not, superstar.
Mm,
He hasn't, quote unquote, made it in the movie business yet.
yeah.
But I think he's giving himself a really good chance and opportunity to do that by having this. And again, I'm going to call it long tail, but where he's really kind of putting his energy into a lot of different places and willing to sort of uh, put the energy where it needs to go when it needs to go there, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
and just to clarify, the reason he is becoming adept in all these different facets of the industry is because he produced a feature film. Like he made it. He wrote the
Hmm.
screenplay, he cast it. He did all those things. So they're not disconnected. He's not doing casting for one company and doing writing screenplays on spec for somebody else. He's that particular project forced him to learn a bunch of stuff, including how to distribute um, at movie festivals, at film fests. So it's cohered around a project that had a lot of, the movie industry is like that. There's so
Hmm.
many, it's collaborative. So he had to wear a bunch of hats. Um, and I think that might be possible for other creative industries. It's not just what kind of medium do you work in, like right now, I mean, I probably, I don't write as much as I do other creative stuff.
Hmm.
Like I actually have I like to sew, I like to, draw. There's other stuff that I do more than I write because it's more relaxing because I work in writing,
Yeah.
I work in the
Yeah.
writing
Yeah.
field. So, and I also don't think it needs to be a full-time focus for to have in order to have a growth plan for your creative work. I'm not talking nothing in my life has full-time focus. Zero. not my creative
Hmm.
adjacent business, because I have a bunch of different hats there. I'm a teacher, I do this, I do that. And
Hmm.
all of those have intermittent focus, but none of them do I do 40 hours a week
Yeah.
exclusively. So I'm not sure if that's what you meant about full-time focus.
No, no, it is. You're making a great point, which is that motivation is key, right?
Yeah.
And so our motivation has been we want to be writing and publishing and editing, right? And
Yeah.
so we pushed, and here we are. And as a result of having to DIY every aspect of it, we've learned, a wide range of skills. And so you don't know, like, somebody could come along, see your course and say, wow, she's really good at teaching, fiction or, whatever, and then brings you out into that. And your energy can flow to that because
Hmm.
you're getting a
Yeah,
lot of
exactly.
attention there and you're getting a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah.
And it's like, the very cliched, definition of luck being the intersection of preparedness and opportunity.
Yeah.
And so being prepared and you're creating opportunities, I
Hmm.
think, is
Yeah. So I think
pretty.
that can be. Do you still think you can't have a growth plan in your creative work, or did I talk you into
I
the other?
think, when I think growth plan, I think really, you know, intentionality
Yeah.
behind it. Like, here's what I'm going to do. This year is dedicated to this, or this first 6 months is dedicated to this. By the end
Hmm.
of the year, it's going to be this. After 5 years, it's this. 10 years, that.
Oh,
And so that, I kind of lean towards that. But what we're really talking about is a little bit more, less structured. It's still
yeah.
intentional, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have that same kind of structure to it, which,
You're using institutional timeframes, like you're
yeah.
referring to 5 years, 10 years. Those are things that institutions can have for a growth plan or
Mhm.
large businesses, but I don't think it applies to individual
Yeah. Well, I
creative
mean,
businesses or work.
so as a short story writer, I could say by, 6 months, I'm going to have four short stories. And by the end of the year, I'm going to have 12, and all 12 are going to be at least 20 different, pitched to,
Yeah. So that
you
part's
can
up to
kind of
you.
set
Yeah.
like metrics kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but, and but then you run into like the time. I don't know. I think what you're doing is opening my mind to getting away from that more structured institutional
Yeah.
way of thinking about it and thinking a little bit more broadly. Um, where so personally, we do a lot of different things and wear a
Yeah.
lot of different hats, and so we don't know which one might get a little bit more attention and
Yeah.
and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
so we keep pushing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do these things I do because I like them and because I got offered an opportunity and I decided to, like pursue it basically.
Hmm.
And it's kind of a chicken or the egg. You get offered the opportunities. Um, like I wrote a book that then became a course because the school I teach through, Editorial Arts Academy, said this, can you do a course on this? And they
Oh,
needed a
yeah.
course. That was, next level up for editors looking for training. They needed like a course they could go to after they'd done these other courses. So that ended up being my course. And then from there, I did a bunch of other stuff and related to teaching because I liked it so much. But I had already had an in-person opportunity because I met somebody at a party, because I knew somebody here who said, "Can you take over? I'm leaving this teaching gig up." It was up at the university, and it was quite sporadic, but I was like, yeah, I did that for 5 years. So I had a bunch of in classroom experience,
Uh-huh.
with adults basically. So yeah, I think to me it's a little bit chicken and eggy about how what you do, what you're interested in, what you find compelling to spend your time
Hmm.
on, how that then becomes an opportunity, but that's okay because you already picked the
Hmm.
stuff you find compelling and then nothing's a waste
Yeah.
of time.
So what would be the plan then? If you're going to say for my creative work,
Hmm.
my growth plan is,
Yeah. Well, my growth plan for 2026 is I
and
have end of
I want to
June.
be clear, I'm talking not creative adjacent, but
No, no,
creative.
creative. Yeah.
Yeah.
End of June is the first draft of the Frankenstein novel I've been working on for several months that I really bore down on starting in March. So that's first draft. I already know most of the plot and stuff like that. I know I can do it. I've done, it's like my seventh novel. The last two, I think I approached them to, like they weren't right. And so I actually ditched not the last two. The last one, I got 50,000 words in and said, I don't even want to write this. I'm done. Um, However, so the growth plan for that is to finish the first draft by the end of June, finish the second draft by the end of October, put it away till 2027, give it a final polish. So this is just one little creative project. It's not everything.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and that'll be in the meantime, I do this novella weekend. My growth plan there is not really a plan. It's all basically luck and timing.
Mhm.
And topic is I'm gunning for to win it the third time. There's only one other person
Mhm.
in the world who's won this novel three times. I've won it, won this contest three times. I won it twice. So that's my growth plan there. I want to win it, which means
Dramatically increases your odds of winning it a third time by winning it two
yeah,
times,
yeah,
right?
I already want it to. So, it's not a growth, I couldn't call it a growth plan, but it's going to get my attention. It's going to get my
Yeah.
mental
So,
attention.
well, here's the thing. So those are individual projects, but your career as a creative writer.
Oh, I don't think of it in terms of a career. I think of it in terms of this is my growth plan is to have it take up more of my day to go forth because I just finished 3 to 8 years of grinding, grim determination, partly the getting divorced and
Mhm.
partly my mom. So um,
Yeah.
I haven't had a creative growth plan for the last 8 years. I have really just been hanging on
Yeah.
to the hope
And
that
to
one day life would improve. And
Yeah,
now
to all
I'm
you new creatives with little kids running around the house, ha ha.
fuck yeah.
Kids are grown, parents are gone.
Yeah,
This is the
yeah.
dream times.
It's the dream time. LOL. But
Not
so the
really.
growth plan is just to get back in the groove of writing stuff, a lot of stuff. And
Uh-huh.
I'm in a different place than I was last time I wrote a lot of stuff. That was probably 10 years ago,
Yeah,
last time I was writing a lot of stuff. So I'm like, that's the first step of the growth plan. I don't have an
I
outcome.
like it.
That's the only outcome I have because it's entirely up to me. I don't have ooh, I got to
Mhm.
get that published in 2027 because I know how fickle the publishing industry is and
Right.
I know that I write weird stuff. It's not, it's great if it happens.
Yeah.
I have a
Well,
plan to how to
yeah.
kind of carry it forward on that level so that, I give it its best possible chance. But that's not a part of my growth plan. That's just what you do with the shit you
Yeah.
produce. And so my
Yeah.
growth plan is
So,
to produce more shit.
yeah. So I mean, I think that's good, and that's like a production plan.
Yeah.
And sort
Without
of
production,
saying,
there's no growth.
yeah, and so then saying the monetization piece, I need to go through a period of production to get to where I can then have a growth plan that addresses monetization.
Yeah.
And then you can get into, because there's lots of questions there now, and regardless of what you're doing in your creative outlet, you're going to have more options because, um, do you go traditional paths? Do you try and create new paths? You've got all these kinds of things
Yeah.
that you
There's tons
think
of
about.
ways to get shit out
Yeah.
there. And you
So,
can repurpose it. You can use it. You can be meta about it, like write a book about how I, couldn't finish my novel. I mean, that's not going to
mhm,
happen, but I think that where I'm coming from is you can't sell intentions. You
right.
need shit to sell. So
Yeah.
you gotta produce it. And
Yeah.
my area of production tends to be books.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. And we've both been through, busy times, life side, but also the creative adjacent business has
Yeah,
been
yeah,
sucking up the time. And so part of the growth plan is making a transition away from so much of that paid work
yeah,
to creative work. And
yeah.
that brings up then, you're gonna, how do there's going to be an issue of money, right?
Not, yeah,
Because
maybe.
if you're
Yeah.
stepping back on the one to do the other, and so I think now I want to, what I'm trying to do is sort of transition into a little discussion of growth plan for creative adjacent work.
Oh yeah, I'm for that.
And so when I think about that, right, because I'm in a similar place, I think you're a few steps ahead than I am, right? I've got to finish some projects, and part of my creative growth plan is finishing projects on the creative adjacent work so I can
Mm,
create more space.
yeah.
And then you think, okay, well, if I want to work less on the creative adjacent stuff, the ghostwriting, the editing, and put more of, attention and energy into this other space, how am I going to do that in a financially? And so you've got to have a growth plan for that as well, I think.
Yeah.
And when I say that, specifically income, and then it got me to thinking, we're already working at full bore, right?
Hmm.
The machine does not have a next gear
Yeah.
to go up. And so, you can't take on more projects. You can't say, I'm going to learn to be a speed writer or a speed editor or a speed reader. So the only way to get past that little conundrum is raise your rates.
That is one way to do it. I do have an alternative suggestion.
Yeah.
So yes, raise your rates. Absolutely. You're at the senior level on your creative adjacent work because that's what got most of your
Hmm.
attention while you were raising your kids and all doing everything you had to do to make make a decent living
Hmm.
out of creative adjacent work, which is right there is not that easy, right? So what I would suggest now is that you cannot simultaneously have a growth plan for creative and creative adjacent work. One has to become a transition plan, and one can be the growth plan. Don't try and do both at once because it's impossible. You can't. If you could do it, you would have done it by now. Uh,
Hmm.
so for me, what I can do, so I'm a developmental editor, and a teacher, right? So in my creative adjacent work, those are my main money-making activities. I teach uh, other editors how to edit developmentally and in other ways. And I also teach writers less often, actually. So my transition plan, while I'm focusing on my writing, my creative work growth plan, I have what I'm thinking of as a transition plan. It's very new, like I haven't actually, um, I also don't have necessarily outcomes for that, but here's what I'm thinking. Because developmental editing takes a different bandwidth, quite a large bandwidth, and because I tended to turn around projects in what I considered a decent window, like 8 weeks for a 130,000 word novels, developmental editor, an 80,000 word nonfiction book. So I'm
Hmm.
doing three things. I'm raising my rates, which I've been doing consistently for a while now.
Hmm.
I'm increasing my turnaround times for those projects.
Uh-huh.
And I am looking very closely at the idea of transitioning to a different level of editing because I also know how to line edit and copy edit, and those
Hmm.
take less creative bandwidth in my brain. Copy editing in
Right. As
particular, I
opposed
find
to
very easy.
developmental. Yeah.
So in those cases, yeah, there's a bit of growth. Really, it's more like holding steady. I also have those like with courses, they're all semi-synchronous,
Hmm.
or my goal is that they all become semi-synchronous by the end of 2027. So I don't need to teach live.
Hmm.
So all the online ones, I mean. And that way they're, because I've found that I created this course in 2019. I operated it live on Zoom for 6 years. Last summer, I created the expanded version of it, blah, blah. This is to
Hmm.
teach editors how to developmentally edit. Last fall, I did the work to, videotape myself giving all the lessons that I would normally give on Zoom to live people. And then I ran it. It was very labor intensive last fall because I was filming myself as I was running it. I was, doing them
Hmm.
simultaneously. I'm giving it again now, and I have to say it's eased up a lot. The income is basically the same, but I don't have to
Hmm.
film everything. So I'm not spending 9 hours a week filming 6 videos um,
Right.
in order to put them up the next week. So just more of that. Like that's the idea is to transition to a less hands-on aspect or a less
Yeah.
creative bandwidth
Yeah.
aspect of my job.
Yeah. Stuff that's a little bit more operates on its own. And um, doing work that you can do at a faster rate and or a faster pace and then charge a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. Same. Basically, the per word rate for line editing and for developmental editing is not that different, right? Because
Mhm.
they're both really intense skills, but one is just you're in the moment. Developmental editing, you're doing a lot of analysis and creative thinking
Yeah.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So,
So it's more of
yeah,
a heavy lift and
yeah,
in terms of, taking up your creative bandwidth and,
yeah,
because when you're really working on a creative project for somebody else, you're thinking about it even when you're not working on it.
absolutely. And so
Yeah.
you're in a particularly difficult position because your creative adjacent work is writing books.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
how would you treat that if you're going to have a growth plan, for example, for just producing more of your own creative work or whatever that is, what would you think about doing so that your creative adjacent work it is sort of a more shifting more to
Mhm.
evergreen stuff
Yeah.
and stuff that doesn't take as much brain power?
So for me, I'm taking a little bit different tack here
Mm,
and raising my rates significantly.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's going to
okay.
create some challenges because, it means there's a smaller pool
Yeah.
of people who can afford that, right?
Yeah.
And so I've got to be more competitive in that smaller pool. And I've
Hmm.
done reasonably well with that.
Yeah.
But I need to, and I have everything, is within my, grasp, or I have everything that I need to be able to sort of do what I need to do. And the way that I think about it is I need to increase my perceived value,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And so there's, one of the standard ways that it's happening, especially ghostwriting and editing, is, do you have the New York Times bestseller, right?
Hmm.
But only a handful of people legitimately do. And
Hmm.
so, and that's, relies on decisions that are made by, the author and the agent and the publisher and, and New York Times own way of how they figure all that and all that kind of stuff. So much of that is outside of my control that it's like, okay, what's in my control?
Hmm.
And that's what I'm focusing on is what is in my control and what can I take from my experiences and CV and everything else and use that to increase the perceived value of working with
Hmm.
me,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so one of those is really getting more intentional and focused on where I specialize
Yeah. Right.
and places that I specialize that not a lot of writers do. So
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of heavy science,
Yeah.
hard science. And there's not a lot of writers who can handle that.
Yeah. Right.
And then the other thing is working at a very high level on business theory
Hmm.
and especially as it intersects with IT.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of writers out there who are doing this thought leadership stuff, but there's not a lot of writers who really have that foundational understanding of where technology comes in, but also uh, leadership practices that go beyond that sort of dive a little bit deeper than the
Yeah.
usual,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
so leaning into that and how I position myself,
Yeah.
is really what it's about. And for what I do, where that comes into to factor is that first meeting.
Yeah.
And so it's one, it's when they come into that meeting, they're like, I am with a serious, grounded person.
Can you elaborate on the like you're talking about the author comes into the meeting or the publisher
Yeah,
or
when
yeah,
when the
okay.
author comes in.
Yeah.
And before that meeting, I want to make sure that I position myself that they're like, this is a serious person. This is
Right.
not someone who's just sort of thinking, I think I can do this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And has a track record and all that kind of stuff. And then, it's in that meeting and sort of saying, and it's not about being salesy because
Oh,
that's
no.
that's going to fall apart and that's going to lose it.
Yeah.
It's about building trust
Hmm.
and helping people and being very willing to have lots of meetings with people and allow them to walk away and give
Yeah.
them every opportunity to walk away. I mean, I almost kind of push people away,
Right.
um, because I want them to be very committed, to what we're going to do.
Hmm.
But it's that process that I think, you know, increases the value that they perceive. And
Yeah,
then,
but they've already found you at that point. So if you're going to set the stage for them to find you, and the specializing in hard science, which you know a lot about, and business theory as it relates to IT, which you are very well versed in,
Mhm,
then that work also comes before that first meeting. And
mhm.
so there's probably areas you can change, actually, like maybe even your website could use a
Yeah,
change.
the website can definitely use a little fixing up. But it's also how I present myself on the various pipelines that I'm
Oh,
on,
the
right?
pipelines. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Maybe the website's
And
not so important.
yeah, the website is more just to substantiate that I'm real
Hmm.
and to
Hmm.
give people a place to go, and they can see video and audio of me, and
Yeah.
those kinds of things. But it's really about, so if I'm on a platform that connects authors with ghostwriters, for
Yeah.
example, or I'm
Right.
pitching competitively, it's how I present myself,
Yeah.
that I think is the key, and refining that away from, because in the past I've sort of been like, I have areas of specialization, but my real specialization is writing, and so
Yeah.
I can write anything.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking, maybe getting a little bit more niche,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah. And so if I can increase what I can charge per engagement, then that means I don't have to do that much more either side work in terms of, getting an editing job, and those
Right.
kinds.
So you'll have
And
more.
I can take on one project at a time.
Mm. Hmm. Okay. Well, that
So
sounds like sort of a growth plan, or maybe basically a transition plan so that you can put more growth into your creative work.
yeah,
Is that the idea? Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Great.
mean, when you think about your mental bandwidth, even,
Yeah.
with ghostwriting, you only have so many hours of the day where you can have that really focused
Yeah,
writing
exactly.
space.
That's what I'm thinking too.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so, but you can transition to, other work, and,
Yeah.
more personal work. So
Yeah. There you go. So you do. So tell me whether you have a growth plan and in which area.
my so my growth plan is to get to a point where I don't have to be so much grinding it out, on the paid work,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And so that's right now, about increasing the rates so that I can lighten that load, which will create
Oh yeah.
space where I can then dive more deeply into my own creative work.
Okay. So the growth plan is really your creative work is the focus of your growth plan, but in order to lay the groundwork for that, you have a sort of, I guess, a transition plan for
Mhm.
your creative adjacent work. So we're in similar
Yeah.
boats there. Mine is I'm becoming less, I guess. I'm trying to evergreen everything that I do on the creative in the creative business side,
Mhm.
so that I have I have the ability to produce a bunch of shit. That's my only growth plan, is just to produce a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff
Yeah.
on the creative side, and then take stock again, every few
Yeah.
months, and see how good I'm getting at that.
Yep. Oh, and I have one addition for the growth plan for the creative side too. So I've
Okay.
done a lot of, novel, short story, and that kind of thing. Um, but we have there, for whatever reason, community theater is really booming around here.
Oh, great.
And I like to go to it. And when I get the chance, I talk to the people who run it, and I say, "Are you looking for homegrown written material?" And they're
Yeah.
always like, "Yes, yes," because that sells. As long as it's good. If they can say this is, produced locally, local writer, those kinds of things. So I definitely want to expand into that as well.
So you've got
Writing,
plays, or you're going
writing
to write someplace?
I've got some that are in process.
Oh,
But
okay.
again, the paid work has taken over my life.
Yeah.
so everything's moving very, very, very slow. But
Yeah.
the opportunities, I'm going out and getting the opportunities or at least understanding where they are and
Yeah.
who they are
Great.
and what they're looking for. So,
Awesome. All right. See you next year. You'll have a play in a local theater. No, I'm just joking. No
yeah.
hurry. No hurry. This will take time. That's the thing
No,
about growth plans. They're not, if it's really fast, it's not a growth plan.
yeah,
It
I know.
it
I
takes some
do get
time.
anxious.
Hmm?
Well, I do get anxious. I'm one of those people who starts stuff and I'm like, I want to be done with the middle. I like the beginning part and I'm like, I want to be done with the middle part. I want to get to the part where I'm sending out. That's probably why I lean so hard to short stories. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I know it's you can't rush.
Steady. Okay, good. I'm glad we had this talk. So I think it's good. Whatever. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, whatever. Thanks for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. We'd love to hear how we're doing, so please leave a comment, join our chat page, or send us an email at giftedunderachievers@substack.com. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you'd like to download your podcasts. Please also hit the share and or subscribe button. It really does help us out a lot. And as always, have an awesome day.